The trip begins like a dream, a much-needed escape for James and Claire. The cruise ship itself is a grand, luxurious liner, gleaming under the sun with its white-painted exterior and endless amenities. As they first step on board, the mood is light, even joyful. Laughter from other passengers fills the air. The smell of fresh ocean breeze mingles with food from the outdoor grill. It's supposed to be perfect, but from the moment they board, James feels a subtle discomfort that he can't quite explain. The first night on board is serene. They dine at the ship's grand restaurant, surrounded by other happy couples. Claire is quieter than usual, though James assumes it's just exhaustion. They retire to their spacious cabin after dinner, the distant sound of music and conversation echoing faintly through the corridors. Their balcony overlooks the dark, endless expanse of the sea, the waves gently crashing below. As they lie in bed, James starts to drift off, but something pulls him back from sleep. He turns and sees Claire standing by the window, her silhouette illuminated by the moonlight. She is staring out at the ocean with an intensity he's never seen before. "Everything okay?" he asks, his voice soft, not wanting to startle her. She doesn't respond right away. After a few seconds, she says, almost distantly, "Just thinking, it's so quiet out there." Her words send a slight chill through him, but he shakes it off. The next day, James notices small changes in Claire's behavior. At breakfast, she barely touches her food, sipping only a bit of coffee as she gazes out over the water. He tries to make conversation, but her responses are clipped, mechanical. When he suggests they explore the ship, she agrees, though her enthusiasm seems forced. As they walk through the grand atrium, James notices her gaze drifting toward the horizon, distracted, as though something out there in the vastness of the sea is calling her attention. At dinner, it's the same. Claire sits quietly, occasionally offering a weak smile, but something in her demeanor is wrong. When James touches her hand, it feels colder than usual. He asks if she's feeling unwell, but she brushes it off with a faint laugh. "I'm fine," she says, though her voice lacks any warmth. The reassurance does little to calm his growing unease. That night, James wakes again to find her standing by the window, staring at the ocean. This time, she doesn't respond when he calls her name. He walks over, touching her shoulder, and she finally snaps out of her trance, turning to look at him with a distant, glazed expression. It takes her a moment to blink, as though she's been far away. "It's so quiet," she whispers again, her voice hollow as if she's speaking to herself. The sense of unease deepens in James. It's not just Claire's behavior. It's the atmosphere of the ship itself. Everything seems off, slightly out of sync, as if the ship is isolated not just from the world, but from reality itself. The festive energy from the first day seems dulled. The once lively passengers less vibrant, their faces blurring into an indistinct haze as they pass by. By the time the night ends, James is left lying awake, a cold sweat gathering on his skin, staring at the back of Claire's head as she lies perfectly still beside him. The next morning, James wakes with an inexplicable sense of dread. He reaches over to touch Claire, but her side of the bed is cold. Panic flares for a moment, but then he hears the faint sound of water splashing. He finds her sitting on their balcony, her eyes locked on the distant horizon, the sea stretching endlessly before them. "Claire?" he calls, but she doesn't turn around. She's still wearing the clothes she slept in, her hair disheveled, her skin unusually pale. Without looking at him, she says, "It's like the water's calling. Can you hear it?" James stands frozen in place. He glances at the calm ocean below, hearing nothing but the lapping of waves against the hull. Something about the way Claire speaks, so distant, as if she's already somewhere else, sends an icy chill up his spine. The day unfolds like a waking nightmare. James and Claire move through the ship, but now everything feels wrong. The bustling corridors that had been filled with people now seem eerily empty. The sounds of laughter and conversation that had filled the air the day before are replaced by the dull hum of the ship's engine. It's not that the passengers are entirely gone, but their numbers are noticeably smaller. People who they'd spoken to the previous day, the older couple by the pool, the young family in the dining room, are simply missing. James tries to rationalize it. Maybe the other passengers are just resting or taking excursions he hadn't noticed. But the growing silence aboard the ship is unnerving. In the dining room that evening, the unsettling quiet has become palpable. The tables, once full of passengers, are now scattered with empty seats. Claire eats mechanically, her fork scraping against her plate in the dead quiet, her eyes unfocused. James notices something strange about the remaining passengers. Those who are still around seem distant, their faces blank, their movements slow, almost trance-like. It's as if they're barely present, their bodies moving on autopilot. James attempts to engage Claire in conversation, but she offers little more than nods or monosyllabic answers. Her pallor has deepened, her skin almost translucent under the low lights of the dining room. When he reaches out to touch her hand, it feels cold, lifeless. It's like she's slipping away from him, emotionally, physically, and no matter what he says, he can't pull her back. Desperate for some normalcy, James decides they need to get off the ship when it next docks. But when he brings it up, Claire stares blankly at him. "Why would we leave?" she asks softly. "We're exactly where we're supposed to be." Her words hang in the air, laden with a strange weight. It's the way she says it, with an eerie certainty that fills him with dread. James tries to shake off the creeping terror. It must be some kind of mass confusion or paranoia, maybe something in the air that's affecting everyone. He resolves to find the captain, or at least someone in charge, to get answers. But as he moves through the ship's interior, the layout seems to subtly shift. Hallways that led to certain areas now turn in on themselves, leading him back to where he started. The bright, inviting lounges now seem dim and claustrophobic. Doors that were once unlocked are now firmly closed. He finally finds a steward, a man with the hollow, detached expression shared by so many of the remaining passengers, and asks about the missing people. The steward's reply makes James' blood run cold. "I'm not sure what you mean, sir. Everyone is accounted for." James looks around at the nearly empty hallways. "Where's the couple we spoke to yesterday? The man with the glasses and his wife?" The steward blinks slowly, as if processing the question takes a great effort. "I don't recall them, sir. They were sitting by the pool. We spoke about their trip to Venice just yesterday." James's voice rises in desperation. The steward simply stares back, unmoved, his blank face almost mocking. "I don't recall them." Without another word, the steward turns and walks away, his footsteps echoing ominously down the now deserted corridor. James's mind races. People were vanishing. The cruise, which had once felt like an idyllic escape, was becoming something else, a prison. But the most terrifying part wasn't just that people were disappearing, it was the realization that no one else seemed to notice or care. And the more he looked at Claire, the less she seemed like herself. The Claire he loved was fading, being replaced by something cold, something unrecognizable. That night, as James lies in bed, he wakes to a sound, a soft, rhythmic whispering coming from Claire's side of the bed. Turning, he finds her sitting upright, facing the window once more. But this time, she isn't just staring. She's whispering, soft, garbled words that seem almost like a chant. His skin prickles as he listens, straining to understand, but the words are foreign, wrong, like they don't belong to her. A language he's never heard before, yet it sends a creeping sense of dread through him. "Claire," he says, his voice trembling. She doesn't stop whispering. James feels his heart pound, fear wrapping around him like a vice. Something was happening to his wife, something beyond his understanding. And the ship, once a place of comfort and joy, was now a slowly tightening noose. The morning after Claire's eerie whispering, James wakes to find the ship in an even stranger state. Claire is still withdrawn, her skin now taking on a sallow hue. She spends more time by the window, gazing out at the sea with an expression that's utterly unreadable. When he touches her, she flinches, as if the warmth of his hand is foreign to her now. It's not just her mood anymore. There's something wrong with her, physically, something almost otherworldly. Determined to break through the mug of dread that seems to have engulfed both his wife and the ship, James ventures out alone. The once grand and sprawling liner feels different, heavier, darker, almost like it's suffocating him. The hallways seem narrower, more oppressive, and the once polished brass fixtures are tarnished, as if decaying overnight. The crew that used to bustle around smiling and attending to the guests are fewer now, their faces blank, movements mechanical. As James walks through the ship, he notices things that don't make sense. Hallways that should lead to familiar places now curve in strange directions. The casino, once full of passengers gambling and laughing, is empty and silent, the slot machines flickering on and off as if they're malfunctioning. The echoes of dice rolling and cards being shuffled play in his ears, but there's no one around. It's as if the ship itself is playing a game with him. His heart races as he pushes open doors to places he thought he knew. The pool deck is completely deserted, the water still and cold, reflecting the dull gray sky. The lounge, once alive with music, is quiet save for the distant creaking of the ship's structure, the silence broken only by an occasional hum that seems to come from the walls themselves. That's when James realizes there's something in the walls, a subtle, almost rhythmic sound that grows more insistent the longer he listens, like a low, distant heartbeat. With every step, the ship feels more like a living thing. The wood panels creak beneath his feet, the lights flicker in sync with his breathing, and the air is thick with a presence he can't see but can feel pressing down on him. It's as if the ship is watching him, studying him, waiting for him to make a wrong move. Then, in the distance, he hears it, the faint sound of Claire's voice, but she's not calling for him. No, it's that same whisper from last night, low and melodic, like she's speaking to something in the depths of the ocean. James follows the sound, his heart pounding, every instinct screaming at him to turn back, but he can't. He has to understand what's happening to her. As he follows her voice, the ship seems to twist around him, halls leading to dead ends where they shouldn't, staircases spiraling into places that don't make sense. Eventually, he finds himself back at the ballroom. Only it's not the way he remembers it. The chandeliers hang lower, the once elegant decor is now faded and peeling, and the grand mirrors that line the walls are cracked, distorting his reflection as he passes. The room smells of seawater and decay, a dampness clinging to the air that chills him to his core. And then there's Claire. She stands at the far end of the room, facing away from him, her reflection warped in the cracked mirrors around her. Her hair is damp as if she's been out in the rain, though the sky outside is clear. She's murmuring to herself, words that make his skin crawl. It's the same alien language, the same soft chanting, only now it feels darker, more insidious. She's not alone in her thoughts anymore. Something is with her. Claire? James's voice breaks as he speaks, cracking under the weight of his fear. She doesn't turn around. Claire! He calls louder, while walking or warning her, whisperation rising in his chest. His footsteps echo in the empty room, but they sound off, like there's another set of footsteps just behind him, shadowing his every move. He spins around, heart hammering, but no one is there. Finally, Claire stops whispering. She turns slowly, her face blank, her eyes unfocused, and then she smiles, cold, distant, and utterly unlike her. Her lips part, and in a voice that no longer sounds like hers, she says, "The sea has always been calling. It's time." James stumbles backward, his throat dry, his mind reeling. He doesn't understand, can't comprehend the shift in her, but deep down he knows that whatever is speaking to him through Claire, it is not his wife. She steps closer to him, her movements slow and deliberate, like a predator stalking its prey. Panic grips him, and he flees from the ballroom, the ship's halls bending and twisting in on themselves as he runs. The walls seem to close in, suffocating him, the air thick with a presence that presses down on his lungs. He can feel it now, the ship is alive, and it wants him. In his frantic escape, he stumbles upon a crew member, but their face is wrong, distorted, like their skin has been stretched too thin over their skull. Their eyes, black and vacant, follow him as he passes, but they don't speak, don't move, just stare. Everywhere he turns, the ship seems to warp around him, trapping him in an endless maze of claustrophobic corridors. It's no longer just a vessel, it's a living, breathing entity feeding off his fear. That night, as James lies in bed, the walls of the cabin pulse with a low, rhythmic hum. Claire lies next to him, but she feels like a stranger now, her breath shallow, her body cold. The ship has her, and James knows it's coming for him next. By the next morning, James is unraveling. The oppressive atmosphere of the ship bears down on him. Every shadow in the corners of his vision feels like it's alive, watching. His wife, his Claire, has slipped further away, now a hollow shell of the woman he once knew. She moves through the ship like a ghost, barely acknowledging him, Her eyes have taken on a glassy, vacant stare, and her skin has grown disturbingly cold and pale, like something is draining the life out of her. James becomes consumed by the need to understand what's happening. Desperation drives him to search the ship for answers, though the corridors seem more unfamiliar with each step he takes. The ship's architecture no longer obeys the laws of reality. Staircases twist into impossible spirals, hallways extend into darkness, and doors that should lead to familiar places now open into endless voids. Every time he glances over his shoulder, he feels as if something just slipped out of view, retreating into the ship's growing shadows. His search leads him to the lower decks, deep into the belly of the ship, where passengers aren't meant to go. The air is damp, thick with the scent of rust and brine, as if the ocean has invaded these forgotten spaces. The walls sweat with moisture, and the flickering lights cast long, distorted shadows. It's here in the bowels of the ship that James finds something horrifying. The door he stumbles upon is unmarked and old. The metal rusted and warped. It groans as he pushes it open, revealing a small room filled with dusty, forgotten relics of the ship's past. Old navigational charts, crew logs, and an array of strange symbols etched into the walls. Symbols that look ancient, almost primal. But it's the large, leather-bound book sitting in the center of the room that catches his eye. The pages are yellowed, brittle with age, and written in a language he can't fully understand. But the sketches, dark, jagged renderings of the sea, the ship, and something monstrous lurking beneath the waves make his stomach turn. As he flips through the book, one passage, scrawled in a shaky hand, jumps out at him, sending a chill down his spine. The sea is hungry. It demands sacrifice. James's hands tremble as he continues to read. The book speaks of a pact made long ago, one that ties the ship to something ancient and malevolent that dwells beneath the ocean's depths. The ship isn't just cursed, it's a vessel, a conduit for this ancient force. It calls to the sea, drawing the unsuspecting into its clutches. Once aboard, the passengers are slowly consumed, body and soul, by the entity. Their energy feeds it, keeping it alive, keeping the ship afloat in its endless, cursed voyage. As James pieces together the horrific truth, it dawns on him that Claire isn't just being affected by the ship. She is part of the sacrifice. The ship is feeding on her, slowly draining her life force, turning her into something that no longer belongs to this world. The passengers who disappeared, they were already claimed, taken by the sea, their essence consumed by the entity that controls the ship. Suddenly, a noise behind him makes James freeze. A soft, wet, shuffling sound. He turns slowly, his pulse pounding in his ears, and sees Claire standing in the doorway, her eyes vacant, her skin almost translucent now, veins visible beneath her pale flesh. Her hair hangs limp, damp with seawater, though she hasn't been near the ocean in days. "James," she whispers, her voice a hollow echo of itself. "It's time." He steps back instinctively, knocking over a stack of dusty logs. "What do you mean, time for what?" Claire smiles, a horrible, unnatural smile. "The sea wants us. It's been waiting." Panic floods James. "No, Claire, this isn't you. We need to get off this ship. We need to..." Her smile widens, her eyes dark and unblinking. "We can't leave. We belong to it now. You belong to it." James backs away further, his mind racing. The walls of the small room seem to press in around him, the strange symbols on the walls pulsing with a faint, otherworldly glow. He realizes that Claire is no longer truly herself. The entity, the force from the sea, has her now, and it's coming for him too. Desperate, James tries to reason with her. "Claire, please, this isn't you. We can still leave. We can still escape." But she shakes her head slowly as if pitying him. There is no escape. The sea always takes what it's owed. The ship, it's alive, James. It's part of it. We've been chosen. There's no running from it. And then, in a terrifying moment of clarity, James realizes the horrible truth. Claire wasn't just a victim of the ship. She had been marked from the beginning. That's why her behavior changed so quickly, why she was drawn to the ocean, why she stood by the window at night whispering those strange words. The sea had claimed her long ago, and now it was coming for him. Claire steps toward him, her movements fluid but unnatural, as though She's no longer tethered to the world he knows. The faint sound of water, distant but insistent, echoes in James' ears, growing louder, more oppressive with every passing second. The ship groans around them, the walls trembling as if the very structure is breathing. "James," Claire says, her voice soft but filled with a dark certainty, "it's time to join us." He stumbles backward, his heart pounding, the realization crashing down on him with terrifying clarity. There was no way out. The ship wasn't just a vessel for the passengers, it was a vessel for the entity beneath the sea, and it had chosen Claire. Soon it would take him too. The air grows colder, thick with the scent of salt and decay, and as James looks into Claire's eyes, those once vibrant eyes that are now empty, consumed, he feels the pull of the ocean, deep and endless, dragging him down into its depths. The air in the room thickens, the smell of seawater and rot clinging to James as he stands paralyzed in front of Claire. Her transformation is nearly complete, her skin translucent, her once lovely features now drawn and ghastly, eyes empty pools of darkness. But what truly chills him is the certainty in her expression, as if she no longer sees him as her husband, but as something to be claimed, to be consumed. James steps backward, knocking over the ancient book with a thud that echoes unnaturally loud in the suffocating silence. The symbols on the walls pulse with a strange light, their rhythm matching the deep, slow thrumming of the ship itself, as if the vessel is alive, breathing along with the malevolent force it serves. The realization crashes down on him. The ship is an extension of the entity beneath the waves, a trap meant to lure souls into the abyss. "Claire, please," James whispers, his voice hoarse with terror, but she's no longer listening. The floor beneath him shifts as if the entire ship is heaving, and he hears the distant sound of water rushing through unseen cracks. It's coming for them. Or rather, it's coming for him. Suddenly, Claire lunges toward him with an unnatural speed. Her fingers, cold and clammy, wrap around his wrist, and for a split second, James feels the depths of the ocean within her touch, the endless, crushing weight of the abyss pulling him down, suffocating, drowning. "We belong to the sea now, James," Claire says, her voice eerily calm even as her grip tightens. There's no point in fighting it. He yanks his arm free, panic surging through him as he stumbles backward. He knows he has to act fast. This thing that has taken Claire is trying to drag him into the same fate, to pull him into the depths from which there is no return. But he can't just leave her. There must be a way to break this hold, to free her from whatever has taken over. James' mind races as he glances around the small, oppressive room. His eyes land on the strange symbols carved into the walls. The book he found earlier hinted at something, an ancient pact between the ship and the entity beneath the sea. He frantically scans the pages, his hands trembling as he turns them. The cryptic symbols and warnings leap out at him, but one passage catches his eye. The bond may be severed by sacrifice, but not all can be saved. A sickening realization washes over him. The ship feeds on souls, and the only way to break its grip might involve offering something in return. But what? Who would that sacrifice be? Claire steps closer again, her once graceful movement now a haunting glide. She tilts her head, almost in amusement, as if she senses his internal struggle. The sea is eternal, James. It always takes what it's owed. The rushing sound of water grows louder, echoing through the hallways now, and James can feel the ship sinking deeper into the grip of the ancient force beneath. Time is running out. Desperation claws at him as he realizes that there might be no saving Claire. She's too far gone. The ship has claimed her, just as it has claimed the others. But what if he could stop it from taking him? James runs from the room, the oppressive atmosphere of the ship making each breath harder to take. He navigates the twisting, shifting halls, the layout growing more confusing with every step. The lights flicker and dim, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow. His mind spins with dread. How could he possibly escape something this powerful, this ancient? He reaches the upper deck, hoping for some sign of salvation, but what he finds chills him to his core. The once pristine ocean that had stretched endlessly beyond the horizon is now black and boiling. The sky above is churning with storm clouds, and the water beneath the ship seems alive, as if something massive is stirring just below the surface. Waves crash against the hull, but the ship doesn't sway. It's as if it's anchored in place, caught in the grip of whatever dark force lies beneath. James looks around and sees no one. The few passengers that were left have vanished entirely. He is alone, alone with the ship, the sea, and Claire, or what's left of her. Suddenly, she's there again, standing at the edge of the deck, staring out at the horizon. Her back is turned to him, her wet hair hanging limply and her body unnaturally still. She speaks without turning around. "It's time, James. The sea is waiting." His heart pounds in his chest. He knows what he has to do, but the thought of it tears him apart inside. Yeah. There's only one way out, to break the pact, to sever the bond between the ship and the entity. But the cost, the sacrifice. He moves toward her, his feet heavy as if the ship itself is trying to hold him back. Claire turns slowly to face him, her eyes still vacant, her lips moving in that strange, ancient language again. But for a moment, just a brief, flickering moment, James sees a flash of something in her gaze, something human, something that reminds him of the woman he loves. "Claire," he whispers, his voice breaking, "I'm so sorry." With a strength he didn't know he had, he grabs her shoulders and pushes her toward the edge of the railing. Claire's expression never changes, not even as the wind howls around them and the ship groans under the weight of the storm. James feels the ship's pulse beneath his feet, a terrible living thing. He knows that if he doesn't act now, it will consume him too, dragging him into the depths alongside Claire and all the others before them. But as his hands tighten around Claire, her body feels weightless, ethereal, as if she's already fading into the air, into the ship, into the sea itself. She smiles one last haunting smile as the words spill from her lips. "We are the sea." And with that, James pushes her over the edge. The wind roars, the waves crash against the hull, and for a moment it feels like the entire ocean is screaming. Claire's body disappears into the dark, churning water below, and then silence. The ship lurches beneath him, the oppressive weight that has been bearing down on him for days suddenly lifting. The storm above quiets, the waves calm. It's as if the ship has finally exhaled, released from its curse. James stands alone on the deck, the wind cold against his skin, the sea buying eerily still. He feels numb, hollowed out by the horror of what he's done. The woman he loved is gone, sacrificed to the sea, just like the others. But in doing so, he has severed the ship's connection to the entity beneath. The curse is broken, for now. The ship begins to move again, drifting slowly through the calm water. But James knows the truth. This isn't over. The sea will always demand its due. And one day it will come for him too. The cold gray dawn barely penetrated the thick fog that clung to the ocean like a shroud, a suffocating blanket that obscured everything beyond a few feet. The Elysium, once a beacon of luxury and adventure, now loomed like a ghostly silhouette against the horizon. Captain Granger stood at the helm of the small tugboat, squinting into the distance, a feeling of foreboding creeping up his spine as the remnants of the ship came into view. As they approached, the faded white paint of the hull seemed to absorb the surrounding light, giving it a ghastly pallor. Rusted lifeboats dangled precariously from the sides, their paint chipped and peeling, and the once vibrant nameplate was barely legible, a victim of the sea's relentless embrace. Granger's crew shuffled nervously behind him, glancing at each other with uncertainty. The tugboat's engines sputtered as they drew near, and silence enveloped them, amplifying the eerie atmosphere. No seabirds circled overhead, and the water was unnaturally calm, as if the ocean itself were holding its breath. A palpable tension filled the air as they docked and prepared to board. As the crew stepped onto the gangway, the first thing that hit them was the stale, musty smell, like damp wood and the unmistakable tang of something rotten. The entryway was dark, the only light filtering through grimy windows, casting distorted shadows across the polished floor. The lobby was eerily still, the furniture shrouded in dust, as though time had frozen. Chandeliers hung overhead, their crystals dulled and gathering grime. "Weird, right?" Mallory, Granger's second-in-command, muttered, trying to lighten the mood. "It's like a time capsule." The crew laughed nervously, but the sound echoed hollowly in the empty space. They moved through the ship, peering into deserted dining rooms where tables were still set with tarnished cutlery and dust-covered plates, remnants of a forgotten feast. The colors of the decor were faded but still luxurious, hinting at a bygone era of grandeur. Granger felt a shiver run down his spine, not from the cold, but from an inexplicable sense of being watched. The atmosphere was thick with a strange energy, as if the ship itself held its breath, waiting. In the lounge, a grand piano sat silent, its keys yellowed and cracked. Alvarez, the technician, approached it, brushing his fingers across the surface. A chill swept through the room, and a single note rang out, clear and sharp, though he hadn't pressed a key. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, dismissing it as a trick of the imagination. "Let's split up and assess the damages," Granger instructed, trying to sound authoritative, though his voice wavered slightly. The crew nodded, though apprehension lingered in their eyes. They fanned out, each member taking a different corridor, the sense of isolation growing heavier with each step. As Granger moved deeper into the bowels of the ship, he began to notice subtle anomalies. Doors creaked open on their own, the temperature shifted suddenly, and the flickering lights cast long, dancing shadows that seemed to sway in rhythm with the heartbeat of the ship. Every so often he thought he heard whispers, low, almost unintelligible, like a conversation just out of earshot. He paused at the entrance to the dining hall, peering inside. The tables were set as if awaiting guests, with elegant dishes placed just so, but no one was there. Yet, in the corner of his eye, he caught movement, a fleeting shadow that vanished as quickly as it appeared. "Granger!" Mallory called from down the hall, startling him. "You have to see this." The captain rushed to where Mallory stood, his heart pounding in his chest. They peered into a nearby lounge, where remnants of old luggage lay strewn about, as if passengers had been in the middle of packing when the ship had vanished. A single high-heeled shoe rested at the foot of a plush chair, an incongruous relic amid the dust. The silence was oppressive, each heartbeat echoing louder than the last. As they regrouped, the crew began to share their experiences. Alvarez mentioned the strange note at the piano, while Mallory recounted seeing shadows flit past him in the hall. They exchanged nervous laughter, but the humor felt thin, stretched taut over an undercurrent of fear. "I think we should check the ship's log," Granger suggested, trying to regain control of the situation. It might provide some insight. They made their way to the captain's quarters, the door creaking open to reveal a room frozen in time. Papers were scattered across the desk, and a musty smell filled the air. The logbook lay open, pages yellowed and brittle. Granger scanned the final entries, each one more frantic than the last, until he reached the last entry, hastily written and abruptly cut off. "They are here, coming." A shiver ran down Granger's spine as he shared the words with his crew. The atmosphere shifted, the air thickening with unspoken dread. Unseen eyes seemed to watch them from the shadows, and a low hum began to resonate within the walls, a sound that felt ancient and filled with sorrow. As they gathered to discuss what they had found, the sense of unease settled heavily over them like a dark cloud. Little did they know they had awakened something in the Elysium that would soon reveal its true horrific nature. The stage was set for the dark history of the ship to unfold, and with it, the doom of all who dared to disturb its slumber. The morning sun struggled to pierce through the thick fog enveloping the Elysium, casting long shadows that crept through the ship's narrow quarters like fingers of the dead reaching for warmth. The crew had begun their work, but the strange atmosphere lingered in unshakable tension that settled in their bones. Granger attempted to maintain focus, delegating tasks to his crew. Mallory was assigned to the engine room, while Alvarez and the other technicians began inspecting the electrical systems. The captain, ever the optimist, hoped that the work would distract them from the eerie happenings. Yet as they split up, the feeling of dread only deepened. In the engine room, Mallory worked methodically, trying to shake the unease that prickled at the back of his neck. The space was dimly lit, filled with the clanking of machinery and the faint smell of oil. As he bent over a rusted panel, he felt a sudden chill wash over him, causing him to shudder. It was as if a cold breath had brushed past him. He straightened up, scanning the room. Just beyond the shadows, he thought he saw a figure flickering, a shape that seemed to waver and then vanish into thin air. Meanwhile, Alvarez was in the lower decks, checking the electrical wiring. As he moved through the narrow hallways, he noticed a lingering smell of decay. The lights above flickered intermittently, casting eerie shadows on the damp walls. While checking a circuit box, he spotted a small child's toy lying in a corner. An old, rusted wind-up monkey, its symbols dulled with age. Intrigued, he picked it up, and to his shock, it began to clang its cymbals, seemingly on its own. Startled, he dropped it, and the monkey fell to the floor with a metallic thud, its music silencing immediately. The strange occurrences began to pile up. As the crew reconvened later, they shared their unsettling findings. Granger's brow furrowed with concern as he listened to Mallory describe the cold spots in the engine room, and Alvarez's eyes were wide as he recounted the toy. Could it be some sort of malfunction? Granger suggested, though his voice lacked conviction. But deep down, they all sensed it was something much more sinister. As they gathered in the lounge to regroup, the atmosphere grew more oppressive. Dust motes danced in the air, illuminated by the weak light filtering through the grimy windows. Alvarez noticed a smear of something dark on the wall, almost invisible against the fading paint. He stepped closer to inspect it, his stomach twisting at the thought of what it might be. A shiver ran through him as he realized it was blood, dried and old, but unmistakably fresh enough to be disconcerting. "We need to stay alert," Granger warned, glancing around the room, sensing the weight of unseen eyes watching them. "Let's keep the buddy system in place." That night, the crew took turns keeping watch, their eyes heavy with exhaustion, but unable to succumb to sleep. They huddled in the dimly lit lounge, the oppressive silence broken only by the occasional creak of the ship settling. As the hours passed, the atmosphere grew thick with an unshakable tension, making even the simplest sounds seem ominous. Around midnight, a soft whisper echoed through the halls, a faint sound that seemed to come from all directions at once. "Help us. Please." The words were barely audible, like a distant plea. The crew exchanged nervous glances, each questioning if they had truly heard anything at all. Mallory, emboldened by adrenaline, volunteered to investigate. He moved cautiously through the darkened corridors, each step echoing loudly in the silence. The whispers grew louder, guiding him toward the dining hall. As he stepped inside, the room was still and empty, but the air felt charged with a strange energy. The tables remained set, but now they appeared almost ominously pristine, as if untouched by time. As he turned to leave, he caught a fleeting glimpse in the corner of his eye. A shadow slipping behind a doorway, just out of sight. Heart pounding, he followed, his breath quickening as he descended deeper into the ship's bowels. But before he could reach the shadow, the lights flickered violently, plunging him into darkness. The sudden stillness was deafening. Panic gripped him as he felt the walls close in, the shadows stretching like fingers toward him. He fumbled for his flashlight, finally illuminating the corridor, but the shadow had vanished. The feeling of dread, however, remained, curling around him like a predator stalking its prey. Back in the lounge, Granger felt a sense of unease as he awaited Mallory's return. Hours passed with no sign of him. Anxiety prickled at the back of his mind, prompting him to gather a few others to search for their missing comrade. When they found Mallory, he was standing in the dining hall, staring blankly at the tables, his eyes wide with fear. "I heard something," he gasped, breathless and trembling. "Something in the dark. It felt alive." The crew's unease deepened as they regrouped, recounting their experiences. The whispering, the strange occurrences, the unsettling feeling of being watched. They could no longer dismiss these as mere figments of imagination. Something sinister lingered within the Elysium, and it was growing stronger. As they gathered to discuss their next steps, the hum began again, low and throbbing, resonating through the very metal of the ship, a sound filled with a strange mixture of sorrow and rage. It enveloped them, a reminder that they were not alone, and that the past, steeped in tragedy, was unwilling to let them go. With a sense of urgency, Granger led the crew to explore further, determined to understand the ship's dark history and confront whatever malevolent force resided within. Little did they know the ghosts of the Elysium were awakening, and the horrors of the past would soon come crashing into their present. The next day dawned with an ominous gray sky, thick clouds hanging low and heavy above the Elysium. A sense of foreboding clung to the air like a dense fog. The crew, still shaken by the previous night's events, pressed on with their work, though the spirit of determination was overshadowed by an underlying dread. Granger felt a growing urgency to uncover the ship's secrets, believing that knowledge might offer them a way to combat whatever malevolent force had begun to manifest. They gathered their tools and made their way back toward the lower levels of the ship, where they hoped to find answers. As they descended into the ship's depths, the air grew colder, the shadows deeper. Each step reverberated off the metal walls, creating an echo that made them feel isolated, like whispers lost in a vast void. The crew's nerves were frayed. They could feel something lurking in the corners of their vision, something they couldn't quite grasp. They reached a section of the ship marked crew only, a narrow corridor that led to the bowels of the vessel. The dim, flickering lights above cast eerie shadows that twisted along the walls. Granger led the way, pushing through a heavy door that creaked ominously as it opened. Inside, the space was cramped, filled with old storage lockers and the remnants of a forgotten past. Tattered uniforms hanging from rusty hooks, hastily discarded belongings scattered about, remnants of lives once lived on this ill-fated ship. A feeling of unease settled heavily upon them, an oppressive presence that made their skin crawl. As they moved deeper, they stumbled upon a sealed door marked Purgatorium. Granger hesitated, his heart pounding in his chest. "This isn't on any of the schematics," he murmured, sensing a dark pull emanating from the door. "Should we open it?" Mallory asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Before Granger could answer, Alvarez stepped forward, compelled by an unknown force. "We need to know," he said, his voice low but resolute. With a trembling hand, he grasped the rusty handle and pulled the door open. A foul stench rolled out, so overpowering that it took their breath away. The darkness inside seemed to thicken, wrapping around them like a shroud. They hesitated, exchanging fearful glances, but curiosity pushed them forward into the depths of the unknown. Inside, the dim light barely illuminated the room, revealing a horrific sight that would be etched into their memories forever. The floor was littered with rotting bodies, contorted in fear and pain, trapped in a twisted pile. The sight was nauseating. The crew gasped in horror, their minds struggling to process the grotesque tableau before them. Granger's heart raced as he realized these were not merely bodies. They were the long-lost passengers of the Elysium, trapped in an eternal purgatory. The truth washed over him like a tidal wave. The ship had become a tomb, and the spirits of the dead lingered, bound by the horrors they had faced. Amid the decay, he spotted remnants of personal belongings: a child's stuffed animal, an elegant woman's glove, a wedding ring, items that told stories of lives abruptly cut short. Granger felt a sense of overwhelming sorrow wash over him, and he staggered back, nearly losing his balance. "Why, how did this happen?" Mallory breathed, his voice thick with disbelief. The walls of the Purgatorium seemed to hum, a mournful wail resonating through the ship. The crew was now caught in a web of despair, the air heavy with a palpable anguish that seeped into their very souls. As they turned to leave, a flicker of movement caught Granger's eye. A ghostly figure appeared, rising slowly from the bodies, its translucent form bathed in a faint, eerie glow. The face was twisted in agony, eyes wide with terror, pleading for help that would never come. The crew stumbled back in horror as the figure raised its hand, pointing toward them with a chilling accusation. The air grew electric, and a deafening chorus of whispers erupted around them. "Help us! Free us!" the voices cried, a cacophony of sorrow and rage that pierced through the walls of the ship, echoing in their minds. In their panic, the crew turned and fled, the oppressive darkness of the Purgatorium swallowing them whole as they raced through the corridors. The ghostly figure followed, its presence relentless, a reminder of the horrors they had just witnessed. Shadows flitted at the edges of their vision, the ship itself seeming to conspire against them, guiding them deeper into its heart. They finally burst into the main lounge, breathless and trembling, collapsing onto the dusty couches as they tried to gather their wits. Granger struggled to regain control, but the weight of the ship's tragic history pressed down upon him like a leaden shroud. "We can't stay here," Alvarez gasped, his face pale. "We have to leave this place." "No," Granger replied, his voice firm but tinged with fear. "We need to find a way to help them. They can't rest until the truth is revealed." But even as he spoke, doubt gnawed at him. How could they confront an entity so powerful, so intertwined with death and despair? The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to deepen, closing in on them, threatening to suffocate the last remnants of hope. That night, as the crew settled into their makeshift quarters, the whispers returned, louder and more insistent. The walls throbbed with the pain of the dead, the air thick with an unholy tension. Granger lay awake, eyes wide open, staring into the darkness, knowing that the ship would not let them go easily. They were ensnared in a malevolent grip, and the specters of the past were only just beginning to stir. Little did they know that their very presence had awakened something far worse than the souls they sought to free, something that thrived on fear and despair, the true heart of the Elysium. The night stretched long and heavy, each tick of the clock echoing through the ship like a funeral dirge. The crew lay restless, the shadows whispering their secrets, laced with dread and despair. As dawn broke, the oppressive atmosphere had transformed into something tangible, a living entity that seemed to pulse and breathe alongside them. Granger awoke, his heart pounding in his chest. The remnants of last night's horrors replayed in his mind, each image of the ghostly figure haunting him. He could still hear the chilling cries for help, feel the icy fingers of fear creeping into his thoughts. With a deep breath, he stilled himself for the day ahead. They needed a plan, something to confront the darkness that surrounded them. As the crew gathered, Granger shared his resolve. "We have to uncover the ship's past. We need to find the truth behind what happened here." The crew exchanged uneasy glances, but a sense of duty began to replace their fear. They had seen the tormented souls. They could not turn their backs on the injustice that had transpired. They returned to the captain's quarters, hoping to find more clues in the ship's logbook. Granger flipped through the brittle pages, desperate for answers. The last entry was the most troubling. A frantic description of strange occurrences aboard, shadowy figures haunting the halls, and crew members disappearing one by one. As he read aloud, a chill swept through the room. "There's something about a storm," Granger said, squinting at the faded ink. "A storm that came out of nowhere. It sank the ship, but there's more, a mention of a curse." The crew listened intently, their fears rekindling. "A curse?" Mallory echoed. "And what does that even mean?" Before Granger could answer, a loud crash reverberated through the ship, rattling the walls. The crew jumped, hearts racing as they exchanged terrified looks. "What was that?" Alvarez asked, eyes wide. "Check it out," Granger commanded, trying to sound authoritative despite his own rising panic. They moved cautiously through the darkened quarters, the air thick with tension. The sound had come from the galley, a place that had once been filled with the aromas of gourmet meals, but now felt like a tomb. As they entered, they were met with K's. The shelves were toppled, pots and pans scattered across the floor as if a great force had swept through. In the center of the room stood the source of the disturbance, a ghostly figure, translucent and shrouded in a swirling mist, its eyes glowing with a feral intensity. The crew recoiled, fear clawing at their throats. "What do you want?" Granger demanded, his voice trembling. The figure raised an arm and the room went ice cold. "You must leave this place," it wailed, the voice a haunting melody filled with anguish. "You awaken the anger of the lost." As the spirit's words echoed, the lights flickered violently, plunging the room into darkness. The crew stumbled back, their hearts racing, feeling the weight of the ship's dark history bearing down on them. The air became charged, a storm of energy swirling around them. "We need to get out of here," Mallory shouted, pushing past Granger. They rushed toward the exit, but the shadows began to close in around them, thick and suffocating. Whispers grew louder, drowning out their thoughts. "Help us! Free us!" In the chaos, Granger grabbed Mallory's arm. "We can't leave yet. We have to understand what's happening." But the crew was frozen, caught in a vortex of fear as the ghostly figure continued to wail, its form shifting and contorting. The sound reverberated through the ship, shaking the very foundation. It felt as if the Elysium itself was awakening, a monstrous beast ready to unleash its fury upon them. Suddenly, a blinding flash illuminated the room, and the figure lunged forward, reaching for Granger. He stumbled back, colliding with Alvarez, as the specter's anguished face twisted into a mask of rage. "You cannot escape the truth!" it screamed, the voice echoing through the galley. In that moment of sheer terror, Granger realized they had stumbled into a cycle of torment, bound to the ship by the pain of the lost. The crew, desperate to escape, rushed out of the galley and into the twisting corridors, their minds racing with the knowledge of their peril. They fled through the ship, the whispers growing more frenzied, urging them to turn back and confront the truth. As they raced past the old storage lockers and the remnants of lives long gone, shadows flickered in their periphery, the specters of the past closing in. In their frantic escape, they found themselves back in the purgatorium, the stench of decay filling the air once more. The sight of the bodies, once horrifying, now seemed almost tranquil in the face of the chaos that had unfolded. Granger felt a pull toward the truth hidden in that room. "We can't keep running," he shouted, his voice cutting through the cacophony of whispers. "We need to face this." With a stealing breath, Granger stepped forward, determined to confront whatever darkness lay within the heart of the ship. The crew hesitated, but they could see the resolve in his eyes. Together, they approached the pile of bodies, their hearts pounding in sync with the echoing cries. "Tell us your story," Granger shouted, desperation creeping into his voice. "We want to help." At his words, the air shimmered, and the shadows receded momentarily. The ghostly figures began to emerge, each one twisting and writhing, their anguished faces reflecting the pain of a tragedy that had been buried for far too long. "Seek the truth beneath the waves," one whispered, the voice carrying a sorrow that tugged at Granger's heart. The storm was not the end. It was the beginning. Suddenly, a wave of energy surged through the room, a tidal force that knocked them off their feet. The crew clutched each other tightly, and the world around them began to blur. Granger's heart raced as visions flooded his mind. The ship caught in a violent tempest, passengers screaming, chaos reigning, and an ancient curse entwining their fates. As the vision subsided, the crew found themselves back in the lounge, gasping for breath. The echoes of the past rang in their ears, and Granger knew they had to return to the depths of the ship to find the truth that lay beneath the waves. "Let's go," he urged, a fierce determination igniting within him. They had awakened something terrible, but they would not turn away. The ghosts of the Elysium had shown them the way, and now it was their turn to uncover the ship's dark heart and face the horrors that awaited them. The crew stood at the threshold of the purgatorium, their hearts pounding as they prepared to delve deeper into the ship's dark heart. The oppressive atmosphere felt charged with anticipation, the whispers now fading into an eerie silence. Granger, resolute in his determination, led the way back through the corridors, retracing the steps that had haunted them just hours before. As they moved deeper into the ship, the air grew thicker, heavier, and the shadows began to twist and writhe as if alive. Every creak of the metal hull resonated like a heartbeat, and Granger felt the weight of the ship's tortured past pressing down on them. The crew clung to one another, a united front against the malevolent force that seemed to pulse around them. "We need to find out what truly happened during that storm," Granger said, his voice steady despite the rising tension. "We have to understand the curse and how to break it." They made their way back to the captain's quarters, now a ghostly reminder of lives lost and dreams shattered. The logbook lay open on the desk, its pages fluttering as if beckoning them closer. Granger skimmed through the entries again, desperate to find the key to unraveling the mystery. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed through the room, startling them. The door slammed shut behind them, and the lights flickered ominously. Panic surged within the crew as they realized they were trapped. "What's happening?" Mallory shouted, glancing nervously around the room. "Stay calm," Granger ordered, trying to maintain control. "We need to focus on the log. There has to be something here." As he read aloud, a passage caught his eye, an account of the storm and the captain's desperate attempts to navigate the ship through the chaos. The ship was cursed, doomed from the moment it set sail. The captain wrote about sacrifices made to appease the vengeful spirits of the sea, Granger explained, his voice steady but laced with fear. As he spoke, the room darkened further, the shadows coalescing into ghostly forms that hovered around them. The crew shivered, the whispers returning, a haunting chorus that echoed in their minds. "You awaken the anger of the lost," they cried, voices overlapping in a cacophony of grief. "Stop!" Granger shouted, raising his hands in a gesture of both defiance and desperation. "We're here to help you. We want to set you free." In that moment, a powerful wave of energy surged through the room, lifting Granger off his feet and throwing him against the wall. The crew gasped, scrambling to their feet, but the shadows tightened their grip, swirling around them like a tempest. "Face the truth," a voice boomed, reverberating through the ship as the ghostly figures emerged from the shadows, their faces twisted in agony and despair. "You must confront the storm that binds us." Granger felt a jolt of understanding. "We need to go to the engine room," he shouted, realization dawning upon him. "That's where it all began. That's where the sacrifice was made. With renewed determination, they bolted from the captain's quarters, racing down the corridors, dodging swirling shadows that clawed at their ankles. The engine room lay ahead, a throbbing heart at the center of the ship, and they could feel its power pulsing, echoing with the remnants of the past. As they reached the engine room, the atmosphere shifted again, becoming electric. The machinery was eerily still, but the air hummed with tension. "What do we do now?" Alvarez shouted, fear evident in his voice. "Find the source of the curse," Granger replied, rushing toward the main engine. "We need to break whatever binds these souls to this ship." They scoured the room, pushing aside debris from the ancient machinery. Suddenly, they uncovered a trap door hidden beneath a pile of rusted tools. Granger's heart raced as he opened it, revealing a dark, winding staircase leading deeper into the ship's bowels. "Are we really doing this?" Mallory asked, anxiety creeping into his voice. Granger nodded. "We have no choice. This is where the truth lies." With trepidation, they descended the stairs, the air growing colder and heavier with each step. The whispers intensified, urging them onward, filled with both sorrow and rage. As they reached the bottom, they entered a cavernous chamber, dimly lit by flickering lights that cast ghostly shadows across the walls. In the center of the room stood an altar, its surface covered in remnants of offerings, wilted flowers, faded photographs, and small trinkets, each a token of remembrance for those lost to the storm. Granger felt a deep sorrow wash over him as he surveyed the scene, realizing the sacrifices that had been made to appease the spirits of the sea. As they approached, a chilling wind whipped through the chamber, and the figures of the lost emerged once more, their faces filled with anguish and desperation. "You must choose," they cried, their voices a haunting melody that echoed off the walls. "Sacrifice one to free us all." Granger's heart raced, a sense of horror gripping him. "No, we won't sacrifice anyone," he shouted, defiance surging within him. "There has to be another way." The specters began to wail, their pain resonating through the room. "The storm demands a price, a life for a life." In that moment of terror, a flash of inspiration struck Granger. What if we don't sacrifice a life, but instead offer something else? We can break the cycle. "What do you mean?" Mallory asked, fear and confusion mingling in his voice. Granger took a deep breath, his resolve solidifying. "We'll offer our memories, our fears, everything we've experienced here. We'll confront the storm together. That way we can release you without taking another life." The spirits fell silent, their expressions shifting from anguish to curiosity. They seemed to consider his words, the tension in the air thickening. "Your memories, your fears," one of the figures murmured, its voice filled with a blend of hope and uncertainty. With a nod from his crew, Granger stepped forward. "We accept this burden. We'll bear the weight of your suffering so that you can be free." The shadows swirled around them, drawing them into a collective consciousness, and the room erupted in a whirlwind of memories. Granger was flooded with visions. The storm, the screams, the frantic desperation of the crew fighting against the waves. He felt the agony of every soul lost to the depths, the pain of every sacrifice made in vain. Together they screamed into the void, releasing their fears, their regrets, their pain. The room trembled as the echoes of the past surged through them, and the specters began to dissolve, their forms becoming lighter, more ethereal. "Thank you, thank you," the voices whispered, a chorus of gratitude filling the chamber. "You have freed us." As the last remnants of the lost souls faded away, a profound stillness settled over the chamber. The air felt lighter, the oppressive darkness lifting as the curse was finally broken. The ship groaned, a deep shudder reverberating through its hull, and Granger felt the weight of the past release its grip. The crew stood in stunned silence, their hearts racing as the reality of what had just transpired began to sink in. They had faced the darkness, confronted the horrors of the pen, and emerged victorious. As they made their way back through the ship, the once foreboding atmosphere felt transformed. The whispers had subsided, replaced by a serene silence, as if the Elysium had finally found peace. When they reached the deck, the sun broke through the clouds, casting a warm golden light over the ship. Granger and his crew stood together, gazing out at the horizon, the promise of a new beginning stretching before them. Though the Elysium had borne witness to unimaginable tragedy, it had also become a vessel of redemption, a reminder of the resilience of the human spirit in the face of darkness. They had faced their fears, confronted the abyss, and emerged stronger, bound by the shared experience of overcoming the shadows that had once threatened to consume them. As the waves crashed gently against the hull, Granger whispered a silent promise to the souls they had freed. They would never forget the horrors of the bomb, nor the courage it took to confront them. The Elysium would sail on, a testament to survival, hope, and the enduring power of memory. The night air was thick with salt and secrets as the SS Celestial Star glided smoothly across the ocean's surface, her hull illuminated by the silver glow of the moon. For the stowaway, a man burdened by the weight of a troubled past, this vessel represented an escape, a chance to leave behind the remnants of a life steeped in regret. With cautious determination, he had slipped aboard, concealing himself among the crates in the cargo hold, where the smell of damp wood mingled with the distant echo of laughter and music from above. Emerging from his hiding place, he found himself in a labyrinth of gleaming corridors and lavishly appointed lounges. The ship, a marvel of luxury, was adorned with opulent chandeliers and plush carpets that swallowed his footsteps. He felt an intoxicating thrill coursing through him, the promise of adventure lighting a spark within. But as he explored the ship's vast expanse, a nagging sense of unease settled in the pit of his stomach. At first, the vibrant atmosphere enveloped him. The sound of clinking glasses and soft piano melodies wafted through the air, a siren song calling him toward the deck where passengers mingled, their laughter ringing like chimes. Yet, as the sun dipped below the horizon and darkness cloaked the ship, he began to notice a disquieting shift. One by one, the passengers retreated to their cabins, their faces pale and drawn, their eyes reflecting a silent terror he couldn't comprehend. As night enveloped the Celestial Star, the ship transformed. The soft glow of the lights flickered, casting elongated shadows that danced along the walls, as if the ship itself were alive, breathing in the silence. The stowaway stood at the railing, peering into the abyss of the sea, feeling an unsettling connection between the darkness below and the darkness that now crept into the ship's corridors. It was during his first nocturnal wanderings that the whispers began. Faint and indistinct, they slithered through the air, urging him to explore deeper. The stowaway felt a magnetic pull, drawing him toward the unknown. With each step, the silence grew heavier, the shadows thicker, as though the ship held its breath, waiting for him to cross an invisible line. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Every creak of the ship's timbers echoed like a heartbeat, and every gust of wind felt like a whisper beckoning him forward. Compelled by curiosity, he ventured down dimly lit hallways, where the wallpaper peeled and faded, revealing the ship's age. He turned a corner and caught a glimpse of a figure slipping into a cabin, their silhouette swallowed by darkness. The stowaway hesitated, a chill racing down his spine. He took a deep breath, rationalizing that it was merely a passenger seeking refuge from the chill of the night. But as the days passed, the encounters grew more surreal. A woman he passed in the corridor would stare at him with haunted eyes, her lips pressed tightly together as if to stifle a scream. Another night, he overheard a pair of crew members discussing a recent disappearance, their words punctuated by nervous laughter that sounded more like a plea for sanity. He felt like a phantom himself, an interloper in a world that pulsed with hidden horrors. And yet, the allure of the sea and the ship's mysteries kept him entranced. Each night, he returned to the decks, his heart racing with the thrill of the unknown. But as he lingered in the shadows, a creeping sense of foreboding took root within him. The ship was more than a vessel. It was a trap woven from secrets and despair, a sentient entity feeding on the souls of those who dared to linger too long in the dark. As the first act closes, the stowaway stands at the ship's edge, looking out over the darkened waters, where something beneath the surface stirs, whispering promises of adventure and treachery. Little does he know that the allure of escape will soon transform into a nightmare from which there may be no waking. The true horror has yet to reveal itself, lurking just beyond the shadows, waiting to ensnare him in its dreadful embrace. As the moon hung low over the SS Celestial Star, casting a ghostly glow on the polished decks, The stowaway found himself caught in a strange web of curiosity and dread. Each night, as the world above descended into silence, he felt an irresistible compulsion to explore the ship further. It was during these nocturnal excursions that the atmosphere thickened, wrapping around him like a fog, dense with an unsettling tension that made the hair on his arms stand on end. The stowaway learned to navigate the labyrinthine corridors of the ship, the shadows shifting as if they were alive. Hallways seemed to stretch on endlessly, each corner turned revealing new pockets of darkness. He stumbled upon luxurious lounges, their opulence dulled by the veil of night, where the echoes of laughter from earlier felt like distant ghosts. The heavy drapes, drawn tight, blocked out any hint of the outside world, creating an oppressive cocoon that stifled his senses. During these twilight hours, he noticed the ship's unnerving silence. While the engines hummed a low, steady thrum, it was the absence of life that gnawed at him. The passengers he had seen during the day, once lively and vibrant, now retreated into their cabins like frightened animals. They left the corridors empty, save for the shadows that flickered and danced at the edges of his vision. It was as if the ship itself were a predator, watching him, waiting for the right moment to strike. One night, he stumbled upon a room that seemed untouched by time, a library filled with dusty tomes and tattered maps. The air inside felt charged, alive with secrets yearning to be uncovered. As he perused the titles, he found a collection of old journals belonging to former passengers. Flipping through their pages, he was drawn into their tales, accounts of journeys filled with joy and laughter that gradually morphed into confessions of fear and despair. The final entries grew increasingly frantic, words scribbled in haste about the whispers and the shadows. They all ended abruptly, the ink blotting into indecipherable marks, as if the writer had been interrupted by something sinister. The stowaway's heart raced as he pieced together the ominous puzzle. Each journal hinted at an unspoken bond between the ship and its inhabitants, a connection that bound them to a fate worse than death. The whispers grew louder, rising like a tide, and he found himself straining to catch the words, half-formed phrases slithering through the darkness. You shouldn't have come, and they can't see you. Yet the most unnerving encounters awaited him in the lounge. One fateful night, he found a group of passengers gathered in hushed conversation, their expressions twisted in anxiety. They were speaking in low tones, glancing around as if afraid to be overheard. Intrigued, he approached, hoping to glean some insight into the dread that had permeated the ship. As he drew near, their conversation abruptly halted, and their eyes fixed on him with a mix of fear and suspicion. He could feel their scrutiny as if they were weighing the threat he posed against their own fear. An older man with sunken cheeks and hollow eyes leaned closer, his voice trembling as he said, "You don't belong here. You need to leave." Before he could respond, they dispersed like smoke, slipping through doorways and vanishing into the shadows. The stowaway was left alone, engulfed by a profound sense of isolation. Their words clung to him, echoing in his mind, stirring a primal instinct to flee. But where could he go? The ship was vast, yet he felt cornered by an unseen predator, and the ocean beyond felt as much a prison as the corridors he wandered. Returning to his cabin, he found it stifling, the air thick with an oppressive silence. Sleep eluded him as he lay in the dark, straining to listen to the ship's whispers, the sounds of despair that reverberated through the walls. It was then that he heard it, a distant cry, a voice wailing from deep within the bowels of the ship. Panic gripped him, and he rushed to the door, compelled to follow the haunting sound that seemed to beckon him from the depths. His heart raced as he descended into the ship's lower levels, where the light was dim and the air grew damp and cold. The walls, coated in peeling paint and darkened by age, felt oppressive, as if they were closing in around him. He followed the sound, each echo of the cry pulling him further into the ship's labyrinth. As he ventured deeper, shadows coalesced into indistinct forms, darting away whenever he tried to focus on them. He was not alone. He could feel the presence of others, their energy swirling around him like a storm. The air crackled with a tension that made him shiver. Finally, he reached a heavy door marked with rust and age, the source of the cries ringing louder in his ears. With trembling hands, he pushed it open, revealing a dark chamber that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Inside, remnants of lost passengers lay scattered, forgotten belongings, half-open suitcases, and abandoned photographs, their faces twisted in joy and sorrow. As he stepped inside, the door creaked shut behind him, sealing him in with the ghosts of the ship. The shadows thickened, pressing against him, and the cries morphed into whispers, swirling around him like a tempest. He realized too late that the ship was alive, an entity hungry for souls, and he had wandered too far into its maw. The stowaway stood frozen, surrounded by the remnants of lives once vibrant, now trapped within the ship's cursed hold. It was then that he understood the true horror of his situation. He was not merely a passenger or a stowaway, he was a part of a twisted cycle, drawn deeper into the darkness, inching ever closer to a fate that promised to snare him within its depths. The allure of escape faded, replaced by the chilling realization that he may never leave the SS Celestial Star alive. The oppressive atmosphere of the SS Celestial Star weighed heavily on the stowaway as he stood in the darkened chamber, surrounded by the remnants of lost souls. The shadows, thick and palpable, seemed to shift and pulse, responding to his presence. An overwhelming sense of dread washed over him as he took in the abandoned belongings scattered about. Once cherished items now serving as mementos of lives, abruptly interrupted. As he stepped deeper into the room, the whispers grew louder, each murmur echoing like 1,000 voices crying out for release. He could barely make out their words, but their collective sorrow was unmistakable. Desperation surged within him as he fumbled through the items, hoping to find some clue to understand what had happened aboard the Celestial Star. Among the scattered photographs, he noticed a faded image of a family, a mother, a father, and 2 children, their faces bright with laughter. The stowaway's heart ached with a sense of loss. He realized he was staring at the remnants of joy that had long since turned to ash. Just beyond that photograph, a journal lay partially open, its pages yellowed with age. He picked it up, trembling as he flipped through the entries. The writing revealed a haunting descent into despair. The entries began innocently enough, recounting tales of wonder and adventure, but soon morphed into accounts of confusion and fear. The final entries grew frantic, filled with exclamations of panic and disorientation. One sentence stood out, scrawled in large, erratic handwriting. "The ship feeds on our fear. We are trapped." Chills coursed through his body as the weight of those words settled over him. The stowaway could feel the oppressive presence of the ship tightening around him, sensing his mounting terror. It was as if the very walls were alive, imbibing his fear, reveling in it. With every heartbeat, he felt the ship's hunger intensifying, a sinister force that would stop at nothing to ensnare him. Driven by an insatiable need for answers, he fled the chamber. Bursting back into the dimly lit corridor, the shadows whispered warnings, and he stumbled through the passageways, desperately searching for a crew member to confront. They had to know what was happening. They had to know the truth. He found one, an older woman with sunken eyes hastily scrubbing a table in one of the ship's dining rooms. The moment he approached, she stiffened, glancing around nervously before locking eyes with him. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice strained, as if she feared saying too much. "Please," he implored, "I need to know what's going on. Why are so many people missing? What happened to them?" Her gaze shifted toward the doorway, and she leaned closer, whispering as if the shadows themselves might overhear. "You shouldn't be asking questions. You need to keep your head down. The ship is alive. It watches. It listens. Those who seek to understand are never seen again." Before he could press for more answers, she backed away, her fear palpable. He felt a cold wave of realization wash over him. The crew wasn't just keeping the passengers in check. They were complicit in maintaining the ship's dark secrets. Feeling the ship's oppressive presence closing in around him, he decided to seek out the crew's quarters. Perhaps there he might discover the truth buried in the depths of their secrets. Navigating through twisting corridors, he arrived at a door marked with a rusty emblem. With every ounce of courage, he pushed it open, stepping into a cramped room dimly illuminated by a single flickering light. The walls were lined with maps, photographs, and strange artifacts collected from previous voyages. On a weathered table lay an open logbook, its pages yellowed with time. He rifled through it, his breath quickening as he absorbed the unsettling entries detailing past journeys. Each page chronicled missing passengers, bizarre occurrences, and strange sounds emanating from the ship's bowels. Then a name caught his eye. Marissa Taylor. He recalled seeing that name in one of the photographs he had found earlier. Gian or Mixture, the mother from the family whose laughter echoed through the remnants of joy. The entry described how her family had vanished without a trace during a stormy night, their cries swallowed by the ocean, their souls claimed by the ship. The ink smudged as if someone had wept over the page, the words, "The ship demands tribute," glaring back at him. The realization struck him like a thunderbolt. The ship wasn't merely a mode of transportation. It was a predatory force, one that feasted on the souls of its passengers. The crew were its keepers, bound by some ancient pact to ensure that the ship's hunger was sated. He was surrounded by ghosts, and every step he took was leading him closer to the abyss. Heart pounding, he turned to leave, but was halted by a chilling sound. The door creaked open behind him. He spun around to find a crew member staring at him with a vacant expression, eyes filled with a mix of pity and terror. "You shouldn't have come here," she said, her voice a hoarse whisper. "It's too late. They know you're here." Before he could respond, the shadows behind her thickened, morphing into indistinct figures that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. The stowaway felt the air grow heavy, a suffocating weight pressing down upon him. The room was alive with whispers, half-formed phrases warning him, condemning him, urging him to flee. In that moment of clarity, he understood. He had crossed a line, delving too deeply into the ship's secrets, and now he would face the consequences. The very ship that had promised escape now sought to claim him, drawn by the fear that pulsed through his veins. With a surge of adrenaline, he dashed past the crew member, bursting into the corridor, the whispers now a cacophony of cries echoing in his ears. As he fled, the shadows stretched and twisted, reaching for him, eager to ensnare him in their web of despair. He ran blindly, the ship morphing around him, every corner and corridor becoming a maze designed to trap him. He could feel the ship's insatiable hunger, a dark presence clawing at his sanity, whispering promises of oblivion. As he reached the deck, the moonlit sea spread out before him, a dark expanse of mystery and danger. He stood at the railing, panting, staring into the depths below, where the water swirled with a sinister promise of freedom. But the choice weighed heavily on him: confront the darkness behind him or plunge into the unknown below. The stowaway knew he had uncovered the horrifying truth of the celestial star, yet the ship was far from finished with him. As the night deepened, he realized he was just one more pawn in a game far larger than himself, and the ship's dark heart still hungered for his soul. The stowaway stood on the precipice of the SS Celestial Star, the cold wind whipping through his hair, mingling with the acrid scent of salt water and despair. Behind him, the ship pulsed with a sinister life, shadows reaching out like clawing fingers, eager to pull him back into its embrace. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of sorrow and anger that enveloped him, drowning out all rational thought. As he contemplated his choice, a surge of instinct propelled him forward. He could not succumb to the ship's grasp. He had to escape. Taking a deep breath, he clutched the railing, preparing to leap into the frigid depths below. But just as he gathered the courage, a sudden scream pierced the night, echoing from deep within the ship's bowels, a cry filled with raw terror that sent a chill down his spine. He hesitated, the decision hanging in the air like a noose. What lay beneath the waves, or perhaps even deeper within the ship? The memory of the family he had seen in the photograph, their laughter, their weighing, came flooding back. Had they met the same fate? A part of him felt responsible, a spectator in their tragic tale. He couldn't just abandon their air cries to the void. With newfound determination, he turned away from the railing, plunging back into the darkened corridors of the ship. The stowaway sprinted through the twisting passageways, each step echoing his desperation. The ship seemed to shift around him, the walls pulsating as if the very structure was aware of his defiance, pushing him deeper into its depths. He followed the echoes of the scream, navigating through dimly lit hallways that twisted like a nightmare. The air thickened with tension, charged with the collective despair of those who had come before him. As he descended into the lower decks, the atmosphere grew suffocating. The walls were damp and slick, as if the ship were sweating, each bead of moisture a teardrop from the souls trapped within. Finally, he reached a door marked with the same rusted emblem he had seen before, the threshold to the heart of the ship's secrets. Taking a moment to steady his breathing, he pushed it open. The room beyond was vast, cavernous, and filled with an eerie glow that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Strange symbols were etched into the walls, glowing faintly in hues of green and blue, casting long shadows that danced across the floor like phantoms. In the center of the room stood an altar, its surface adorned with objects of reverence, passenger belongings, jewelry, and remnants of lives once lived. The stowaway approached cautiously, dread curling in his stomach. It was here that the whispers converged, the cries of the lost resonating off the walls in a symphony of despair. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, an ethereal woman with hollow eyes and a haunted expression. She moved with an otherworldly grace, her presence both captivating and terrifying. He recognized her. She was the mother from the photograph, the face of joy turned to a mask of sorrow. "Help us," she whispered, her voice a mournful echo. "You must understand what this ship demands. It is hungry for souls, and it will not rest until it claims its due." The stowaway's heart raced. "What do you mean? What happened to you?" "To your family. Our lives were taken, devoured by this wretched vessel. It thrives on fear, on despair. We thought we could escape, but the ship has its claws in us, binding us to this cursed place. You cannot fight it. You can only join us, or you will meet the same fate." The shadows thickened around her, swirling with a malevolent energy. He felt a wave of desperation wash over him, and a surge of empathy for the lost souls trapped within the ship. The whispers crescendoed, each voice intertwining with the next, creating a haunting chorus of anguish. "Your fate is intertwined with ours," the woman continued, her voice growing stronger, more urgent. "You are a part of the ship now. The more you resist, the more it will seek to claim you. You must make a choice. Surrender to the ship's hunger, or confront it. The truth lies beneath the altar." With trembling hands, he approached the altar, his heart pounding like a drum in his chest. He could feel the ship's dark energy surging beneath him, a palpable force eager to pull him into its depths. As he reached out to touch the altar, he felt a jolt of electricity surge through him, a connection to the souls that had been consumed. Visions flooded his mind. The ship's past voyages, moments of laughter turned to screams, the final moments of those lost within its confines. He saw flashes of families torn apart, friends lost, and dreams extinguished. Each scene gripped his heart with icy fingers, and he felt their despair mingling with his own. But then, a glimmer of defiance ignited within him. He would not succumb to the ship's darkness. He had to fight back. Summoning every ounce of strength, he pressed his hands against the altar, channeling his resolve into the very fabric of the ship. "Leave us," he shouted, his voice echoing through the chamber. "You will not claim another soul." The shadows recoiled, swirling violently, the whispers rising to a deafening crescendo as the ship fought back against his defiance. The walls shook, and the symbols etched into the stone began to glow brighter, illuminating the room with an otherworldly light. He felt the ship's fury surging around him, a tempest of anger and despair. In that moment, he understood. The ship fed on the fear of those who wandered its decks, and he had to embrace his own terror to overcome it. He closed his eyes, recalling the laughter of the family, their joy contrasting sharply with the despair that surrounded him. Drawing from that memory, he began to chant, a mantra of hope and defiance, a call to the spirits trapped within the ship. The room trembled, and he felt the energy shift, the shadows writhing as if they were being pulled back by an unseen force. "Let their laughter echo through these halls once more. You will not hold us." With a final surge of energy, the stowaway broke through the shadows, igniting a wave of light that burst forth from the altar. The whispers transformed into a chorus of joyous laughter, drowning out the despair that had once filled the air. In that instant, the oppressive atmosphere shattered, and the ship trembled violently. The stowaway felt a rush of air as the ship's hold weakened and the shadows began to recede, drawn back by the light he had conjured. But as the shadows dwindled, the ethereal woman stepped forward, her eyes now filled with a mix of gratitude and sorrow. "You've freed us, but your fight is not over. You must choose, either succumb to the ship's hunger or face the darkness within. The choice will determine your fate." The stowaway's heart raced as the chamber illuminated around him, the remnants of lost souls swirling in a maelstrom of light and shadow. He realized the battle was far from over, but with each heartbeat, he felt his resolve strengthening. He would confront the darkness head-on. He would escape this nightmare and ensure that the ship's hunger would no longer consume anyone else. With renewed purpose, he turned toward the door, determined to face whatever lay ahead. As he stepped back into the corridor, he felt the weight of the ship's darkness behind him, but the laughter of the freed souls echoed in his ears, guiding him forward. He could sense the culmination of his journey was drawing near. A final confrontation awaited, and the ultimate truth of the SS Celestial Star would soon be revealed. The stowaway emerged from the chamber into the dimly lit corridor, the echoes of laughter from the freed souls still reverberating in his mind. With each step, the oppressive atmosphere of the SS Celestial Star pressed down upon him, shadows swirling hungrily at the edges of his vision. Yet, he felt emboldened by the memory of their laughter and the knowledge that he was not alone in this fight. As he navigated the twisting passageways, he could feel the ship's anger rising like a storm within its belly, the walls trembling with its fury. The whispers intensified, a chaotic blend of fear and desperation, warning him of the dangers lurking just beyond the shadows. The air crackled with tension, as if the ship itself were preparing for a final showdown. Determined to confront the darkness, he pressed on, his heart racing as he approached the upper deck. He had come to understand that the key to his survival lay not just in escaping, but in facing the ship's heart, its very essence, the source of its power. He needed to sever the bond that tied him to this malevolent force once and for all. Reaching the deck, he was met with a breathtaking view of the open sea, the moonlight casting a silver sheen over the waves. But the beauty of the night was overshadowed by a sinister aura. The ship's wrath was palpable, and he could sense the shadows coiling around him, ready to pounce. Standing at the helm, he gazed into the dark waters, feeling the ship's malevolent energy thrumming beneath his feet. It was as if the vessel had a heartbeat of its own, each pulse echoing with the cries of the lost. He knew he had to confront the ship, to break its hold over him and the souls trapped within. "Show yourself," he shouted into the night, his voice cutting through the whispers that surrounded him. "I will not be your prey." The wind howled in response, and the shadows coalesced before him, swirling into a monstrous form, a grotesque manifestation of the ship's rage, a creature born of despair and hunger. It towered over him, eyes glinting with malice, a swirling vortex of darkness and anguish. "You think you can defy me?" the creature boomed, its voice a low growl that reverberated through the air. "I am the essence of this ship, the harbinger of despair. You are nothing but a fleeting spark, destined to be snuffed out." But as the stowaway stood before the creature, he felt the laughter of the freed souls surge within him, an incandescent flame igniting his spirit. "I am not afraid of you. You have claimed enough lives. No longer will you feed on fear and despair. I choose hope." With that declaration, he focused all his energy, calling upon the spirits he had encountered, those who had been trapped in the ship's darkness. The air around him shimmered with light, the shadows recoiling as their laughter filled the night, becoming a harmonious symphony that resonated through the very fabric of the celestial star. The creature shrieked in fury, its form distorting as it struggled against the wave of hope radiating from the stowaway. "You cannot resist me! I will devour your soul!" But he pressed on, channeling the light and joy he had witnessed, merging it with his own defiance. The shadows surged around him, but the brilliance of hope pierced through, illuminating the deck in a radiant glow. He could feel the weight of despair lifting, the shadows losing their grip on reality. As the creature writhed in agony, the stowaway stepped forward, reaching into the heart of the darkness. "You are nothing but a manifestation of fear. I reject you." With a final surge of willpower, he unleashed a blinding light, a beacon of hope that engulfed the creature. The darkness writhed and twisted, battling against the radiance, but the stowaway's resolve burned brighter than the abyss. The shadows shrieked, a cacophony of despair, as they were consumed by the light. In a brilliant flash, the creature exploded into a cascade of shimmering particles, dissipating into the night sky like embers from a dying fire. The air around him surged with warmth, the darkness lifting from the ship like a shroud. The celestial star groaned, its structure vibrating with a newfound energy, as if it were awakening from a long slumber. The stowaway stood on the deck, breathless but triumphant. He had confronted the darkness and emerged victorious, freeing not only himself but the souls of those who had been lost. The ship's grip on reality had weakened, and he could feel the remnants of its malevolence ebbing away. But even as he savored his victory, he felt a sense of urgency. He needed to leave before the ship fully awakened and realized its loss. As he rushed to the lifeboats, the horizon glimmered with the first hints of dawn. The ship had been stripped of its power, but it was still a treacherous entity, and he knew he had to escape before it could fully regain its strength. Reaching the lifeboats, he hurriedly untied one, the rope slipping from his fingers as he worked to free it. The whispers had faded to a gentle hum, the spirits no longer bound to the ship. In that moment, he felt a profound sense of peace wash over him. As the lifeboat drifted away from the celestial star, he looked back at the ship that had once been a prison. The morning sun bathed it in golden light, illuminating its once sinister facade. He could see the lingering shadows within, but they were no longer alive. They were merely echoes of a past filled with sorrow. The stowaway took a deep breath, feeling the salty air fill his lungs as he paddled toward the horizon. He had faced the darkness and triumphed, but the scars of the experience would remain. The memories of those lost souls, their laughter and pain, would forever be etched in his heart. As the sun rose higher in the sky, casting its warm glow over the ocean, he realized he had not only escaped the SS Celestial Star, he had also found a glimmer of hope amidst the darkness. In that moment, he knew he would carry the spirits of the lost with him, honoring their memory by living a life filled with joy and purpose. The celestial star faded into the distance, a specter of sorrow left behind. But the stowaway, now a survivor, looked toward the horizon, ready to embrace the dawn of a new beginning.